Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business podcast covering all things tech, engineering, innovation and motorsport. Hosted by me, Chris Broome.
And me, Fiona Pawley. This is a series of unscripted conversations with leading business owners and high-tech talent, talking about their experiences within the Silverstone and motorsport business communities.
Welcome to the next episode of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to welcome onto the show Commercial Director for Silverstone Park, Chris Kimber-Nickelson. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me on.
So format of the show, Chris, as I know you are an avid keen listener, is to go through quick career background, talk about Silverstone Park, which is obviously where we are both based, talk about the business region, talk about why people should be looking at coming to Silverstone Park to either move or and partner up with local businesses, and then also just to ask some personal career and other related questions at the end about your good self, if that is okay, sir.
That's absolutely fine. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So, career background, as I always do, I went on to the power of LinkedIn, and so I can see that you got a construction management degree from Portsmouth down in Pompey, and then early career was quantity surveyor, and then moved at sort of head of development at MEPC, which is the organisation that owns Silverstone Park. You then went off and had a little bit of time at Savills as a director, and then you came back to MEPC, where you are, as of today, commercial director. So first thing I have to say is MEPC, sort of two stints earlier in your career and obviously now latter. MEPC and Co, good company to work for.
Yeah, they're a great company. We're not a massive company. You'd be surprised at the fairly small number of people that run the quantity of real estate that we run. I think, well, we've been bought by a larger company now, so we're now part of the Federated Hermes company, and that's a much bigger company. But we've been part of them for the last, I think, coming up 2 years. But originally, when I joined MEPC, there were about 35 people, I think. So it's not a big company. So nice family feel to it, and yeah, everyone gets along. And because of what we do, they're all consummate professionals, with the exception of myself. So it's a good company to work. There's always someone you can go and ask for advice. So yeah, it's a nice place to be. Clearly, I came back. So
yeah, absolutely. And so we're recording this session today in Silverstone Park, so we're in the Innovation Centre, where you guys have got an office and we're a couple of doors along on the ground floor. And so for those listening and watching this who haven't heard of or haven't been to Silverstone Park, why don't you tell everybody what's here?
Okay, well, Silverstone Park, what's here is the Innovation Centre, as you've just mentioned, and you can have a small or large business take space in the Innovation Centre. You can go from being a virtual tenant, where you don't actually have any space, but you do have a mail address and a phone answering service, and the ability to then book the meeting rooms in the building, so that you've got access to the facilities that a larger business have got. Or larger, some of our tenants in the Innovation Centre are larger businesses that just need a base in this area, because maybe they're operating in Motorsport Valley, or but they've got larger headquarters elsewhere in the country. And then aside from that, we've got about 900,000 square feet of real estate, most of which is what I would describe as small to mid-box industrial. So that's steel frame buildings with Wrigley tin on the outside that people can use for a variety of uses, and they do. We've got people who do working on electric vehicle technology, battery technology. We've got people who do testing of technology and components. We've got people who make things, whether that's racing harnesses, or we've got some people who sell things, some people who service some marks of car that everybody would be familiar with. You know, Ferraris and Porsches and Lotuses. We've got people who are carrying out sort of major innovation in manufacturing, really, and that's across a number of sectors, whether that's not just motorsport, but all other automotive and defence and marine and other things like that. So we've got an eclectic mix of businesses and buildings on the park. Some have got bit more office in them than others. So maybe up to 50% office space in the buildings. But mainly it's a collection of what I would colloquially refer to as sheds. But we've got planning consent so that we can build more offices, and you know, we'll see what type of buildings the market needs as we go forward.
Sure, but you call them sheds, but obviously they're good-looking sheds. I mean, anybody who was to drive around Silverstone Park would be impressed with the quality of the build,
we like
the
to
signage.
Think so. We like to think that they're you know, that we've employed decent architects to create some not just boring sheds, and then each phase that we do is an evolution of the architecture, and they're not all the same looking. It's not just a bland wilderness of grey cladding. You know, we try and bring them the evolution of the design forward each time we do a phase, and hopefully we'll see that when we do phase 4 later this year. You know, you'll see an even further improvement of what we're able to produce. So
phase 4, well, let's just touch on that. So phase 4 is going to include sort of what for residents and.
Phase 4 is, again, small to medium-sized units, but with fairly high office content. Again, probably some of them will be up to 50% office content. That's where the market seems to be at the moment. That's where most businesses, they want to bring together both, well, the size of business that we have here at Silverstone is they don't need a sort of separate office building for accounts and HR and design. They're all together. They're sort of small to medium-sized enterprises, so they're all together in one building, and those office-based people are in that building as well. And then you've got, you know, the sort of the crazy inventor types who are down on the shed floor, nailing things together to try and, you know, invent the next best thing. And that's where the market is, and that's, you know, quite exciting. And phase 4 will be 102,000 square feet of those types of units across 3 terraces, but it'll also include a new cafe for the park and a gym for the park, and we're going to reuse the existing command centre, which is where the Silverstone circuit used to house all of the security control and command, with all the screens up for the CCTV and the police coordination. They don't use that particular building anymore. They do that somewhere else, and we're going to reuse that building as a nursery, because it lends itself quite well to being a nursery. So we're carving out some outdoor space, and we'll refurbish that once we've done phase 4 as an add-on to that project. We'll refurbish that building as a nursery.
That's fantastic. So the community here are going to benefit from, just to repeat, a gym, nursery, on top of all the other sort of community
and a new cafe.
things.
Yeah, I mean, we're acutely aware, and it's been a problem with business parks generally across the UK since the pandemic. That amenities struggled because people weren't going to work. Everyone was at home. So, you know, all sandwich shops on all the business parks around the UK pretty much shut. And the same applies here. We had a cafe running over there that the circuit were running that they weren't interested in running anymore. So we're going to re-provide a cafe for the park, which, you know, anybody will be able to use who drives, any general public up and down the A43, you can stop in. And the same will apply to the gym. So it will be predominantly for people who work on the park, but it won't be limited entirely to that. So the local community will be able to come in and have a membership, or how, we're not exactly sure how we're going to run that yet, but there are a number of models that we could pick. And then the nursery will be the same. I mean, clearly, predominantly for people who work on the park to come and drop their kids and pick their kids up from, but it'll be open to all, because we need to make sure that these things are sustainable. And yes, we've grown the park to a certain size, but there's a lot more to do. We're probably just under halfway through our planning consent to grow the park. So we probably need people from the surrounding villages to come and use these facilities so we can keep them sustainable in the short and medium term.
Very good. And when do you think phase 4 will be completed and the shops and the gyms and the nursery will be open?
We're hoping it's got planning consent and we've got a price from a contractor. So we're hoping that we'll be able to start it this side of Christmas, which means that it should complete just before Christmas 2024.
Very good. Very good. And you've mentioned Silverstone Circuit. So for those that aren't familiar, obviously Silverstone Park is based literally on the circuit or next door to the circuit. What's the sort of history and the relationship between both entities?
Yeah, that goes back to 2012, and I was actually part of the acquisition team that worked on the deal that was put together with the circuit. The circuit borrowed some money to build the wing building, which sits inside the circuit, which they needed to do in order to secure the future of the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So it's the right thing to do. But in order to pay that money back, they needed to find some source of income. And what they did was they got a planning consent, an outline planning consent for the land that they owned around the circuit. So basically, in very crude terms, it's everything that's outside of the chain link fence that forms the pay line for the circuit. And they got that planning consent. And then we bought, after 9 to 12 months of negotiation, we bought a long leasehold interest in that land that had that planning consent on it from the circuit. And we've been building it out and providing the utilities to it. So we've put in new gas, water and electric mains to serve that land, as well as foul drainage. And we've been building that out for the last 10 years. We're coming up to our 10-year anniversary in about 10 days' time. So we have an ongoing relationship with the circuit in as much that they're our neighbours, and we help them as best we can when they're trying to run their events program for the year, because clearly they need to try and run the Grand Prix, being the biggest of those. But really, we're a separate entity that just sits outside the fence and is trying to create a sustainable business park. On the back of, and I don't mind saying that, on the back of the Silverstone brand, it's a clear brand, but it's a place,
Absolutely. Well, also it's a brand worth using, because if you just look at the other businesses that are here in the sheds, as you call it, but I look outside my window here and I see Aston Martin's beautiful. You can see it outside yours as well, and that's a lovely building. We've got Porsche here, Lotus here. Lunas, which is a fantastic business that Mr. David Beckham's also invested in, plus many other companies here, all benefiting from the Silverstone brand. But it's also not just motorsport businesses here or tech or engineering businesses, isn't it? There's lots of other types here, as you said, fairly broad brush, including service businesses.
There are service businesses, certainly in the innovation centre. We've got the advantage of having some lawyers in the building, and they're different types of lawyers, whether they specialise in IP or or other things, real estate, or just general legal advice. We'd be happy to see more service providers on the park if they wanted to come and be part of the community, definitely.
And what about sort of blue chip, much larger? So we've got some small to medium sized businesses here at the moment, all of which are fantastic. What about sort of hopes and aims for the park to grow even bigger?
Yeah, we'd love to get some blue chip. I mean, we've talked in the past. We've had many conversations with several blue chip household names. You mentioned Aston Martin. We did talk to them about whether they were going to come into the fold. They're just outside the window. They're just on their own piece of land. That's fine. We talked to them about helping them out. We've talked to others. It would be great. We've still got a lot of space. We've got over 1 million square feet of planning consent still to build out, which it would be lovely to think that we could get a company to have a headquarters building here, or possibly even a small campus of buildings. That would be great, and you know they'd have a say in shaping the park if we could put together a deal like that.
Okay, onwards and upwards. Hopefully that can be secured over the coming years. And what about yourself? So you're obviously involved in property and commercial real estate. And so what, from your sort of background and your education and career, you know, what was the driver? What keeps you doing what you do?
Well, I think what keeps me doing what I do is the fact that no 2 days are the same. And it goes, you can have a day that goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, really. So one day you can be looking at you know, selecting the taps that are going in a new building at Silverstone, to, like I say, but possibly talking to a large, you know, global company about what their next property requirement may be if they want 1 million square feet of property. So it does go from the very small detail right up to big scale strategic stuff. No, like I say, no 2 days are the same. There's a lot of problem solving within that range of discussions. You can have all manner of problems, and they're never the same. The way you have to think around solving those problems is probably what keeps your brain interested on a day-to-day basis.
Very good. Very good. And based on the career you've had today and all the problems that you've helped solve, if you were to go back and talk to your sort of 20-year-old self, is there any pearls of wisdom, one piece of sort of information nugget that you could provide them to help them?
I think that's really difficult to tie it down to one nugget of information. I think, and I think you just, very often it's really good to take a step back. And perhaps with the exuberance of youth, you don't do that so much. But when you've got a bit of grey hair like I have now, you probably are much more willing just to pause, sleep on a problem, not rush in and necessarily answer it. Try and put yourself in the perspective of the other people that you think at the time might be causing you that problem. Perhaps they're doing it for all sorts of different reasons. So I guess just time and thought. Nothing is, you know, we're not in the business of saving lives. We're in the business of building buildings. So there's nothing is not life-threatening. That's the piece of advice that I would give to my younger self. Just, you know, take a beat.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, good advice. And you mentioned COVID earlier when we were talking about obviously cafes in, you know, sort of parks around the country. So COVID obviously was still with us, candidly, but you know, certainly the first couple of years were testing for all of us. Were there any sort of personal lessons or anything that you sort of reflected on or still reflect on from those early years?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I had never worked from home prior to the pandemic. Never, ever. It was an alien concept to me. I didn't even like, you know, waiting in for the gas man. That was just something that was completely alien. And then to go overnight from having, you know, worked for 20 years without working from home to doing nothing but working from home for 12 months probably. That was a big shock on a personal level. All testament to everyone that I worked with over that period in terms of getting on the Teams and learning how to use Teams and Zoom and all the platforms. But you know, as an industry, it's an incredibly different way of working. We'd never worked as a construction industry like that before. The construction industry is very much go to site, get round a table, get a big drawing out, get the pens out, have an argument, draw all over it, come up with the right answer, drive home, you know, happy that you'd done a day's work and you'd agreed what was going to happen. That obviously it's quite difficult to translate that as a MO to doing that on the screen, and I think it was a challenge. It was a definite challenge. And then, you know, we had jobs on site at Silverstone. Phase 3 was on site when the pandemic hit. You know, we'd got 4 buildings going up. totaling about 250,000 square feet. That takes a lot of manpower or personnel to complete. And how do we get everybody into site safely? How do we set up sanitation stations? How do we, try and manage that situation? And the contractors that we had on site worked extremely hard. We did lose some time, not necessarily due to their fault, but because of materials not turning up and things, because factories were shut. Sure. So it was hard. Pandemic was hard. Yeah.
We came through it. Phase 4, fingers crossed, due to start in the coming months, and sort of onwards we go.
If we can get the investors involved, and it's a tough market at the moment, our investors are with us. We have a rolling 5-year business plan, and they're bought into that plan, and phase 4 is part of that plan. But each and every phase gets signed off individually. So we just need to get their sign off. At the moment, obviously, with the global market is very difficult. Everyone's cautious.
Sure.
We're going to be asking for several £1 million, which is there for us if they're confident enough to press the button, and we hope that they will be. We need to give them that confidence.
For sure, fingers crossed. Yeah, and I can certainly vouch for wanting to use that gym. So if the gym comes to the park, I know a few people around here will definitely be using that, plus the cafe.
We will try and get the gym going as fast as we can for you guys.
Gym, and then go and have a coffee and cake afterwards. Yeah. So anyway, cars. Before we sort of start closing off the interview, are you into your cars?
Yeah, I like cars. I think again, as you get a bit older, you realise that perhaps you're not going to get the dream car that you really, really wanted when you were a kid for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, I mean, they're great things, aren't they? They just inspire people, and they're it can be very emotional things, and things of beauty, almost pieces of art. I'm just looking out of the window at a Porsche, which is a lovely looking car. But
and what was the dream car as a kid?
Well, I mean, the car I've always lusted after is actually a classic Porsche, a 356. Would be nice. And I'm a little way away from that, I think, because they're quite expensive. Unless I could sell one of the kids, I
suppose. And what about first cars? What was your first car?
My first car was a Morris Minor that I rescued out of my grandfather's garage. It had been in there since he died for 7 years. And so it got dragged out and dusted off, and I took it to university in my second year. And then it got re-garaged after about a year for quite some time. And then about 3 years ago, I got it back up and roadworthy again, MOT.
Very good.
And yeah, so it's I've still got that car, but yeah, I don't drive it much. I don't get much time to drive it, and it needs a bit more work.
Yeah. Well, I know that you live in Oxford, but hopefully it gets tidied up. And if you're ever able to bring it here, I'm sure there'd be a few people who'd like to look at it, because they don't typically, you've said the Porsche, and there's lots of other fast cars opposite our windows in the other direction with Ferraris and everything else at the end of the road, but you don't get to see too many classics. So certainly not Morris Minors.
No, I think with a bit of work, it might make it as far as Silverstone.
Fine. Cool, Chris, thank you for coming on the pod. I think we've been 20 odd minutes, which is fantastic. We've covered off obviously phase 4, Silverstone Park, reasons for businesses to come here. Before we close off, is there anything else that we haven't covered, anything I haven't asked you that you want to quickly get on air?
No, I don't think so. I mean, all I would say is, there is a community feel to Silverstone Park. This is a demonstration of it. The fact that we're in the same building, I'm taking part in your podcast. We know each other from the corridor. And people know each other around the park. What we try and do is put those networks together, those groups of people, like-minded individuals. Not everyone is always thinking the same, but there's a definite feel to the park, and I think if people have the opportunity to move to the park, then they should seriously consider it. There's a great community. We did the sports day a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just about walk again now. It's great. We love people to come here and be part of our community. We try and have fun as well as, it being a place to work.
No, I entirely agree and support that. And so for those that haven't already checked it out, if you go to the show notes for the podcast, we'll have links for Chris's profile on LinkedIn, but also Silverstone Park, so you can obviously visit the website, look at all the other directory members, including Longhurst, which is my business, availability, business development opportunities, and latest news, which will also include some historic podcasts that we've recorded for other people that are based here. Also, if you visit insidesilverstone.co.uk, you'll be able to see the other 106 episodes that will have been aired so far, which includes a lot of Silverstone Park members, Silverstone Technology Cluster members. In case you're interested to understand who else is here, potential business opportunities, people that you could potentially connect with. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you in the corridor. And remember, we've got a really good coffee machine here and beer in our fridge. So if you want to come down and grab a beer, let me know.
I did not know you had beer. I'll be down straight away.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please give us a 5-star review.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst. To listen to more episodes, please visit insidesilverstone.co.uk. Please note neither Fiona or Chris work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Technology Cluster or Silverstone Circuit.